Burning questions.
Insightful answers.
Listener's choice.
With Clement Manyathela.
So on our Listener's Choice feature today, we're discussing the wealth tax. Listener's Choice is all about you as a listener co-curating the content of the show with us. So if you've got some ideas or there's some topics, especially topics we have not touched on or topics we have not sufficiently dissected, or maybe a particular angle we didn't look at, just send us an email and tell us, can you guys discuss this? The email address is cm@702.co.za. We're talking about the wealth tax today because one of our listeners emailed us and asked that we bring in an expert who can explain what a wealth tax is and whether it could be a viable solution to government's revenue challenges. So we have invited Menachem Kay, who is the CEO of Octagon Financial, joining us now via Zoom. Thank you so much for making time for us. Good morning.
Good morning, Clement. How are you?
I'm all right. I'll go straight to...
Good morning to you and to your listeners.
Yeah, I'm going to go straight to the question that the listener really wanted to understand better.
Sure.
What is a wealth tax?
A wealth tax, Clement, is essentially a tax levied against the more wealthy of financial community, so as to bring revenues into the fiscus and to be able to use those revenues to assist those who need the money financially. Essentially, it's a way of increasing taxes for the fiscus.
Okay, and how do we know who is wealthy? Because even when the finance minister, was talking about how some people suggested that, that government consider a wealth tax, one of the concerns or arguments that are put forward for people that are against it is that, well, do we really know what's the net worth of people in this country? Do we really have a register where we know what they own? What is their net worth? Then if we don't, then is it then not going to make it difficult for us to determine if people fall within a particular wealth bracket?
It's actually an excellent question. I mean, the simple answer would be we would use our tax revenue services. Edward Kiswede, the head of SARS, will tell you, and he is an incredibly good commissioner. And they, by virtue of who pays what taxes, should know who is wealthy and who is not. However, we live in a society where, as a result of inherent corruption within our society, that not everybody that should be paying taxes is. And so there will definitely be those who are outside of the tax environment that are extraordinarily wealthy but are not paying taxes. But I suppose, that kind of goes to the broader question. The broader question is whether a wealth tax is a viable option or not. But essentially, the tax commissioner should be able to tell us who is wealthy and who is not.
Yeah. And some people make an argument that, well, if you look at South Africa, I mean, almost half of our taxes come from 570,000 or so individuals. And so that's already a tax on the wealthy people, because that represents 7.2% or so of individuals who are taxed, but only 3.9% of individuals are probably who are employed. So there are few people, I guess the point I'm making is there are few people who are employed in this country. When you are earning a particular amount of money already, your tax shoots up at 40% or just over 40%. Isn't that already a wealth tax? And I think that's an argument that other people make, that the people who get paid more, they get taxed more. Isn't that a form of wealth tax on its own?
Well, Clement, I think it's a broader question. It goes down to essentially a socialist view of taxes versus a capitalist view of taxes. So the socialist view of taxes is that those who have more must pay more taxes, so that those who have less can share in wealth. That's the socialist view, and it's a very noble intent. I mean, surely the way I just put it across sounds very attractive to most. Unfortunately, it's never quite worked, and the reason for that is if you disincentivize a person, and if you say to them, no matter how hard you work, we're going to tax you more and more, and for those who don't have jobs and are not able to contribute to the fiscus, we'll give them more and more, which is very noble in intent. Unfortunately, effectively, it actually doesn't work. So the argument against wealth taxes is a few issues. I'll try to distill them quickly. The first, as you've already mentioned, is that the higher earners are already paying extraordinarily high tax. South Africa has a very, very high tax environment, and so there is essentially a wealth tax already. That's the first thing. The second thing is that, as we discovered since the whole VAT debacle with Ernest Ngwana wanting to raise taxes by 2%, in a very few short weeks it's been uncovered, although I think we knew this already. We don't have a tax problem in this country. It's not that we don't have enough money coming into the fiscus. Our problem is that the money is not being distributed correctly, number one, and number two, that it's being wasted. And the reality is that if we were to stop wasting money, the taxes already been brought into the fiscus would be more than enough to subsidize education, policing, hospitals, etc. This is what our poor people need. So, very briefly, a wealth tax has a very noble origin, and it is a wonderful idea. But in a country like South Africa, stop wasting money, stop spending money poorly, stop corruption. There'll be more than enough money for everybody to have what is necessary, so that people in our country can get access to proper education, to proper hospitals, to proper healthcare. We don't need a wealth tax.
The next question that this listener wanted to have answered was, if a wealth tax does get implemented, what then happens to like income tax? How does it then differ from income tax?
Well, it very much depends. That's another excellent question. It very much depends on how it's implemented and what way it's implemented. But what I think lands up happening is eventually the people who are contributing, and you gave some beautiful stats earlier on, but the people who are contributing to the fiscus feel that they are carrying far too broad responsibility, and eventually they emigrate, or they stop paying taxes, or they look for ways to avoid paying taxes, and it actually just doesn't work. I think we need to differentiate, and I've mentioned it a few times already, between what is a beautifully academically noble idea. Communism, socialism, these are beautiful ideas in theory. They're horrible in practice. I mean, I was listening to your previous stint when you were talking about mental health and giving men a healthy space to express how they feel. I think it's important that we as a country take a look at ourselves in a very open and honest way. Yeah. We do not have a revenue problem in South Africa. We have a spend problem in South Africa.
I want to give the listeners some opportunity to also ask some questions here about the wealth tax. You can do so on 072-702-1702. Alternatively, call us on 011-883-0702. Let's speak to Chipetso, who's calling us from Four Ways. Good morning.
Hi, good morning, Clement, and good morning to your experts. Sure. I think that he clarified it. He clarified a bit, but I wanted to say that, as far as I know, currently in South Africa there is no such thing as a wealth tax. I think that there is a discussion regarding that, but SARS does have a unit that is that specifically look after the high net worth, and they do have a definition of what is a high net worth. But as for wealth tax, I think that this is a discussion that is currently happening. Can your experts clarify? And if there is such thing as a wealth tax, what tax type is it, and under which statute is it provided from? Thank you, Clement.
Okay, thank you so much, Shipetso. I'll get my guest to respond in a moment, Menachem. But before that, here's a WhatsApp voice note that's also come through.
Clemmy, good morning, man. Flores here from...
Did that...
Hi. Just another point of view that you need to take into account. Remember, people that are high net worth individuals or have to pay a lot of tax, pay people to limit their tax burden. They have experts to manage their tax requirements and all of those things. The last one is, if you impose these kinds of taxes onto the wealthy, they've got better and viable options just to take their capital outside. Trust you me, there are many people that have left because of these taxes if you, like you just mentioned, half of the taxes are paid by just 500,000 people. Now, if you want to burden them even further, you have a risk of losing more of them to other countries, which are more than willing to take them and require less taxes.
Yeah, Menachem?
Thank you, Clement. Wow, those are excellent questions. So the first, I didn't actually hear the middle one. I only heard the first and the third. So just to answer them, we don't yet have a wealth tax that is branded as a wealth tax. But as your last question asked, said that the more you earn, the higher the tax you pay. There's nothing in particular wrong with that. But that essentially is part of a wealth tax. So as your first caller mentioned, we don't have a wealth tax that's branded. This is a wealth tax. But as you earn more, you pay more. This essentially means that less and less people are covering a further and further burden. And as your third person said, you continue to do that. You continue to load people with a tax liability. They will engineer a way not to pay that tax. And I really go back to the point I made earlier on, is that the noble intent of a wealth tax is that it's really, really noble. And again, your first caller said that there's called the ultra high net worth part of SARS that is specifically supposed to target those who earn over a certain amount. And I've had quite a bit to do with them, and I think they're excellent. Having said so, your third caller made the point. Continue to squeeze a rock dry, and people will just take the money offshore.
Absolutely.
And how does that leave our country? So and there's a lot of good news here. The good news is that our fiscus is quite capable of running our country efficiently on the amount of money we've raised. What's the point of a wealth tax? The point of a wealth tax is ultimately to help those who are without money, who are without hospitals, without policing, without education, and move money to help them to be able to get those facilities. Now, if we stop wasting money, if we stopped having a bloated parliament, if we stopped having bloated and inefficient government departments, there would be more than enough money to make sure that those in our country who desperately need the help get the help. So the focus on a wealth tax, although very attractive in a populist way, is inefficient, impractical, and will actually serve to weaken the economy further. It will not strengthen it.
Yeah, and in fact, the other concern is that if you really go ahead with the implementation of a wealth tax, isn't that going to increase tax evasion or avoidance?
It's a difficult one. I actually believe that those who pay taxes pay their taxes, and those who don't. You give a person who is going to avoid taxes any form of an excuse, so they're going to avoid the taxes. Your third caller's point about people hiring experts to help them reduce their tax burden, that's a fair statement, but it needs to be broadened a bit. The South African Revenue Services provide very legitimate ways of reducing taxes. It's not a question of doing so in an illegal fashion. It's a question of making use of the exact provisos that allow us to reduce tax burden in an efficient way. So, Clement, I think in a nutshell, I'm against the wealth tax because of its inefficient distribution of wealth back into the economy. I think that, as you gave some amazing stats before, I think that if the people who are already carrying so much of the tax burden are further burdened in any form whatsoever, whether it's VAT, which is a bit more broad-based, or a higher tax base, it's a tax percentage, it's just going to reduce the size of our economy. It's not going to strengthen it.
Yeah. Let me wrap up with this WhatsApp voice note that came through.
Good morning, Clement. With regards to wealth taxes, according to my understanding, the capital gains tax was a wealth tax because it's taxed at a higher rate for the part that you include in your taxable income. And the same as donations taxes. Donations are taxed quite high. So can you just clarify if donations tax and capital gains tax are not already the wealth taxes that we have?
Yeah. Another
excellent question, Clement.
Yeah, before you come in there, Justin says, Clement, besides higher income tax for the wealthy, we have capital gains tax and inheritance tax, which are wealth taxes. Many of the loopholes with trusts have been closed. So these forms of wealth tax are much more difficult also to avoid. That's a message there from Justin. Yeah, go ahead.
I couldn't agree more with both of those. Just to quickly clarify, so capital gains tax implemented in October 2001, so that's quite deep into our democracy, was a form of wealth tax, but it was also a form of fair wealth tax, because otherwise a person could accumulate massive wealth and essentially never be part of the broader economy, and that wealth would be kept by themselves. And so I think a lot of us are quite pro capital gains tax. And as your caller said, there are different versions of capital gains tax, whether it's an individual, a trust, or a company, or whatever it is. So there's that. Donations tax is just a form of ensuring that tax, that's a tax avoidance measure. In order that if I gave you money, okay, and that way I could distribute the wealth from myself to yourself, and in not paying capital gains, that's actually tax avoidance. So the donations tax is for a different reason. And then inheritance taxes. Now that's where there has been a form of wealth tax. Again, not branded as a wealth tax, but essentially it definitely is. The wealthier a person is when they die, the greater their effective tax rate is, their corrective estate duty, death tax actually is. So that is a form of wealth tax. And that has been, and I was hoping that I would get the chance to finish with this, and let me just say this now. The government has been very, I think some would call it wise, others will call it conniving, in over the years, slowly increasing the tax burden on the wealthy. But again, and I say this a number of times, it goes back to the distribution of the taxes being brought in. If we were to reduce our expenditure, just take a look at your own home, Clement. You don't need to look beyond your own expenses. If you're earning 10 Rand and you're spending 8, you're in a bit of trouble. If you're able to bring your expenses down to 6, you're now saving 4. You're providing for your own retirement. You won't be relying on the government for you are in charge of that destiny. If our government were to spend money in a more wise and efficient way, then these conversations that we are forced to have would become irrelevant.
Yeah, absolutely. Menachem, thank you so much for speaking to us. Menachem Kay is the CEO of Octagon Financial. That takes us to 11:30.